Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, a new kind of podcast where no topic is off limits. We're bringing in experts and owners to have the conversations we should be having as a dog community. Each week, a new guest will share firsthand experiences, educational resources, or professional guidance to help you learn and grow along with your dog. You won't get one perspective here, you'll get them all, because every dog is different and every owner is too.
You can follow along on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Straight Up Dog Talk, or by visiting www.straightupdogtalk.com. Tune in from any of your favorite podcast platforms.
Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk. We're back again this week, only it's just me flying solo. Unfortunately, Josh is unable to join us today, but we do have a very special guest. Her name is Kendra, and she's here today to talk about her dog Luca and how she helped him recover from his separation anxiety. How are you doing today, Kendra?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited to have you here. This is kind of a popular topic, especially in the last couple of years with people being home during the pandemic and then going back to work and not really knowing how to appropriately deal with what was happening when they were coming home because their dog ripped up the couch or a wall or the carpet. And you kind of went to some extraordinary lengths to make sure that Luca recovered from this. So I'm really excited to have you share this all with the audience. So just to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Kendra. I am a family medicine nurse practitioner. I live in Colorado. I was registered nurse for about 16 years, transitioning into nurse practitioner roles. I've been doing that for 5 years. So I am child-free by choice. So my kids are obviously my family. I was primarily just a cat person. I had 2 senior cats for the longest time. Then somebody dumped a kitten in my yard 3 years ago, so I saved him. And then I've always wanted to have a dog, but unfortunately with my nursing schedule, I felt like I couldn't do that with working 12, 13-hour shifts. So I didn't actually adopt my dog until 2020, the pandemic, which is when a lot of people adopted. And that's how I came about adopting Luca. So do you want me to, I'll talk a little bit about Luca's, he's a pit bull mix. He's about 70 pounds. A little bit of his backstory. He was put into the shelter at a year old, and he was in New Mexico. So he was in the shelter at the start of the pandemic. So five months in the shelter, and then he was actually taken from the shelter to the Colorado Cell Dog program. So he came from that program where they work with the inmates, and the inmates train the dogs. That's where I got him from. But total time with him, kind of without a family, was probably 8 months. And so my thing is, when I first got Luca, I knew nothing about dogs. So I ended up having to learn very quickly about a lot of different dog behaviors. Not only his separation anxiety, but he also has reactivity to a lot of things in the environment. So I was one of those dog owners that was kind of blindsided with everything that can go wrong with a dog can. So I had to kind of learn from a lot of experts really quickly.
I think that it's really amazing that you got him from the program at the prison. I think that those programs are really, really incredible. We actually have a couple of trainers who have been on podcasts already or who will be on the podcast already that were actually part of those programs as inmates. And I think that those programs are amazing. There's another one that I really like to follow that's in California, which is Marley's Mutts and their positive change program. That's one that I've supported for years and years. And they do such an incredible job, and they provide such an incredible opportunity to make the community better for, the dogs and also for the inmates, because it gives them something to have as a career when they move on from that. So I think that it's an incredible partnership between the community and the prison, and it creates not only job opportunities, but it creates opportunities for people to get dogs that are already sort of trained a little bit, at least, sometimes to even farther extent, just because they've had the opportunity to work with people and work in a tighter situation. So first of all, I think, again, that's incredible that you did that. And second of all, there were a lot of people that adopted dogs during the pandemic. And again, you are a nurse, so you do have a really crazy busy schedule. But that's another thing that we've talked about on this show before, is that having a dog and your lifestyle and making adjustments for the dog in your lifestyle is something that's so important, because no matter how many hours you spend at work and your dog is at home, whether you have somebody come over and walk, or you're able to take breaks and come home and visit them and let them out for potty breaks, or whatever it is that you build into your routine for that dog, it's so much better than them being in a rescue facility, in a kennel 24 hours a day, and not having a loving home. So you really did, save Luca from a potentially, not great life, and you have given him a much better life with cat siblings. So props to you for that. We love to hear that kind of stuff. So you said that you really kind of dug into the separation anxiety with Luca because you started experiencing some problems with him regarding that. Let's first talk about what his separation anxiety looked like, and the, side effects, symptoms, and things that you were coming home to that really indicated to you that this was a problem.
Definitely. So when I first got him in 2020, I work a 5-day-a-week schedule in the clinic. So I was going to work 2 days a week and home for 3 days doing telehealth. So obviously the first couple months, I know they say that the dog's going to be, they take time to adjust. So that whole 3-3-3 rule, it's probably longer than just 3 months to get settled. But so initially I didn't focus on any kind of, what is he like when he's separated from me at all, because he did everything with me. So initially it was very hands-on. When I did go to work, I immediately put him into daycare rather than being at home by himself, just because I wasn't sure how he would be at home, especially with my cats too, the safety of everybody. So initially I was totally clueless about if he even had anxiety at all. And so initially the first few months, I would just do little short absences, like, I'm going to go to the grocery store, pick up my groceries. And I did think he was crate trained because he did come from the prison program. I don't know how well they did that. They kind of made it seem like, he can be in the crate fine. And they wanted you to feed the dog in the crate and kind of all that. So I had the crate set up and I would put him in there. But the first indication is I would just go 20 minutes to the grocery store and come back, and the inside of the crate bed would just be soaked with drool. But again, I didn't really understand it. And then a few other, it's probably once a week. And then a few times he actually broke out of the crate, and that's the big metal crate. And he actually would chew his way to get the door open, and would be on my sofa when I would come home. And again, I thought, oh, okay, maybe he just wants to be out of the crate. So understandable. And then it just kind of escalated to where I did leave him in the house, just free roam, go for it. And unfortunately, I was working, an 8-hour day, but with commute, it was 10 hours. And I started noticing, initially I'd come home and there would be water all over the floor. And I thought, oh, my cat plays in the water bowl. No, it was drool just everywhere on the floor. And then I finally realized I needed to set up cameras. And then when I set up the cameras, that's when I realized for him, his anxiety was, as soon as I would leave the house, he would run to whatever window he could see me, excessive pacing, drooling, vocalization with howling. And I then got to the point where he started to be much more destructive. He would run and jump at my front door and just claw the door. And I think if I had not caught it at that stage, he probably would have became much more destructive in the home environment. But I realized quickly after that, I think he has severe separation anxiety. And I actually started to do my own research, on Google, see what was happening. And then I finally went to his veterinarian, and she kind of talked to her about the symptoms. And she actually gave me a little handout. This is separation anxiety, the true pet disorder. We need to start addressing it. And we started him on Prozac, but that's all she felt comfortable with. And then she sent me to a behavioral health vet. So, but initially, again, for a new dog owner, unless you understand what you're looking for, it can be very challenging because, like I said, you might come home and just think, oh, well, they looked a little bit panicked, but then they settled down. When in reality, you look at the cameras and see what they're really doing at home, they're actually not settled at all. And there was a couple times he actually did have an accident in the house, very unusual. And if you're not looking for those signs, you might just assume that, oh yeah, the dog was just destructive a little bit. He was bored. When in reality, the boredom is actually, the destruction is not boredom. It's the fact that they're having a panic attack. And so I think that's the big thing that a lot of new owners can get confused with. And they might just think, oh, well, I put him in his crate and he chewed his crate bed. But in reality, the chewing the crate bed is because they're having a panic attack. And I think that's something that a lot of dog owners struggle with.
100%. I can tell you, working in the veterinary clinic, I have seen some dogs get themselves into some really bad situations in kennels. We've cut dogs out of kennels. I have seen videos of dogs who have taught themselves how to open the locks on their kennels with their tongues, which is quite impressive, actually, and just let themselves out. I've seen dogs bend the metal doors and get, like halfway out of the crate and then be stuck and then have to be cut out of the kennels because you can't open the door and you can't do anything else because they're like half in and half out. Kennel training is definitely something that I want to have a trainer come on here and talk about more in depth at some point, because it is something that is different for everyone and it does take time. Some people will argue that you shouldn't feed in the kennel. Some people will argue that you should. For me personally, Fitz was very, very easy to kennel train. He had been sleeping in a box at night when he was a puppy because they already had 2 other dogs and they wanted the puppies to feel safe. So he would sleep in a box. So that shifted to him sleeping in a laundry basket, which then, transferred him into his kennel. And I do allow him to eat in his kennel. He gets food when I leave and he's fine. He'll go into his kennel. He gets excited about his kennel. And that's something that, we've talked about in other episodes, that there's this stigma that's associated with certain parts of dog training. And kennel training is one of those things that a lot of people fight back on. And really, it's supposed to be a safe place for your dog. It's supposed to be some place that they're comfortable going into. It's supposed to be, noted as this is a cue to relax. This is a cue to lay down and chill out, and I'll be back in a little bit. But if you don't know how to implement those things into the training and into your daily life, it's going to be difficult for you because it's something, again, that takes time. You have to do it for an hour at a time or a half an hour at a time while you're home. Sit outside the kennel and pass food through and talk to your dog to let them know that they're fine and it's safe. But there are so many other things that go into it that, like I said, we definitely want to go more in depth on probably a full episode on crate training and advice from trainers. But you obviously realized that all of these things were going on, and you were smart enough to put up cameras and kind of see where this was leading you. You saw that he was, getting in the windows and jumping on the doors. And obviously he had been destructive in the crate, the excessive amount of drooling, couple accidents. But those are all very strong indicators that there was some stressors. Now, since you have worked with him and gone through this whole training process with him, is he still on the Prozac, or were you able to modify his behavior enough that he was able to get off of it?
Yeah, no, he's still on medication. The medication was a long journey. And just to backtrack on the crate stuff, crate training is definitely, there's so much controversy on it. And the cell dog program, unfortunately, our cell dog program here in Colorado was very alpha driven. They used the relative training. They didn't use a lot of positive reinforcement. Knowing that now, I would not have gone with that program, but that's for another day. But they used the crate for everything. They believe that the dog should sleep in the crate, eat in the crate. But Luca definitely was not very comfortable with it. Do I have a crate now that he uses just to have snacks so he can chill in there? Cool, yes. For him, and what I learned about a lot of dogs is that when they have separation anxiety, they can often have crate anxiety. So he was just as panicked inside as he was outside. And relating it to my human world, I would have anxiety too. I think if I was crammed into a crate and I already had anxiety, I mean, people can get claustrophobic in my exam room at work, so I get it. And I think it was important understanding that. So for me, my first thought was not like, I'm just going to put him in a crate and crate train him for 8 hours that I'm at work because it just felt like that wasn't a good fit. So when I first realized he had an issue, his regular veterinarian, she gave the fluoxetine and the Prozac. That's the only med that she felt comfortable with. So then I was referred to, there's one veterinary behaviorist clinic in Colorado. It's actually in the Denver area. So I ended up doing a consult with them, and they were the ones that were more specialized to determine what's the best medication fit. Do you want to use their trainers? Do you not want to? So I started the process with them, which is very expensive to work with the veterinary behaviorist. And I know it's out of for the average dog owner, I think it's kind of out of their budget. I totally understand that. But for me, I had the resources and decided to use them. So we ended up doing a consult with the veterinary behaviorist up there. Again, it was my first time kind of working with them. I felt like the feel, the vibe was very like focused on aggressive dogs rather than like my fearful anxiety type dogs. Just my take of working with them. But we started on Calm, which is a specialized medication just for dogs for separation anxiety. So he was on that every day, and then she gave a PRN dose as needed dose, my medical terminology comes out, an as needed dose of clonidine. So that's actually a blood pressure medication that we use. I actually use it for humans too, for anxiety. So he was on both meds, and that was, medications take a lot of trial and error with your dog. And I know there's also a lot of stigma behind using medications or not. For me personally, I felt that one, separation anxiety can take such a long time to overcome. And unfortunately, I did need like a quick solution because I work Monday through Friday. I work full time. He's got to be able to stay home by himself for 8 hours. Like that, I didn't have a backup plan. I was using daycare, and he was going to daycare, and then he actually created anxiety at daycare. It got to the point where I was taking him to daycare 3 days a week, and he got so freaked out at daycare, he wouldn't even leave the car. I would pull into the daycare, he would panic in the back of the car. So, and here I am carrying my 70-pound pit bull into a daycare facility, and so he had, I don't know, like maybe he thought I was dropping him off at the shelter. But so I kind of, I resulted in medication much more quickly than maybe some other dog owners. But for me, having to work Monday to Friday full time, full time dog daycare, just a pop-in visit wasn't enough for him. And then my dog was not good at daycare. So I had to jump to use medications a lot more quickly than some other people. And everyone has their preferences. But for me, it was a game changer to do the medications with the training. And that was a big thing for me. So
first of all, another goal of this podcast is that we're removing shame from all elements of dog ownership. And your dog needing to be on medication is not shameful. It's not something that works for every dog, and it's something that works for some dogs and some owners. And that's just how it is. It's not something that, you should feel bad about in any way. It's what works for you guys. And, given your situation and his reactivity towards going towards the daycare, I think that all signs, you had a behaviorist, which we are also going to have a vet behaviorist come on later this year and actually talk about some of the things that vet behaviorists offer as specialists, because there are only about 90 of them in the United States, and it is very niche and it is expensive. But I think that having the listeners understand exactly what they do from the perspective of a vet behaviorist will probably help a lot of other owners. So I do think that it is amazing that you were able to go to one and that you were able to get the medications that help him. Because, dog daycare, I'm not a strong advocate of dog daycare for my dogs. It doesn't work for either of them. Toby doesn't like other dogs. He was used as a bait dog. And it took us 3 years to get him and Fitz even get along. So it's just one of those things. And Fitz is Fitz. He does his own thing. I don't think that he actually thinks that he's a dog. I'm pretty sure he thinks that he's a person. And so when other dogs try to play with him, he's just like, nah, I'm good, So doggy daycare is not ideal for my dogs either. But there are plenty of dogs that do really well in dog daycare situations. And, right now when we're recording this, the whole dog upper respiratory thing is going around. It's getting really hot and heated. So at this time too, unless you have to take your dog to dog daycare, right now is not the time to be doing that. Getting somebody to come and let your dog out during the day, having a pet walker, pet sitter, something like that is probably a better option just at this time, because there is not really a cure for what's happening. They don't really understand it. There's not a vaccine. So, that makes your dog safer health-wise to be able to be at home too. So you're kind of avoiding that risk there as well.
No, I definitely, it's a big thing. And I think for me, I had the double whammy with my dog because it wasn't just separation anxiety, but he also had the reactivity. So I couldn't just have anybody come into my home. Like certain dog walkers were not a good fit for him. When you're diagnosed with that, you're given that SA diagnosis, they tell you like you have to stop all absences. Meaning, if you want to treat the condition, you do need to stop the panic disorder from happening. That was, again, it was a challenge for me being single, because that meant if I needed to go someplace, he had to come with me. But he was also reactive, so certain places I couldn't go with him. He's definitely not a patio dog. I'm not a patio person, so it's fine. But it just created like, okay, do I leave him at home when I grocery shop for 30 minutes, or do I leave him in the car? A lot of times I did, because I felt like he had less anxiety with me. So it gets really tricky. And then when you're doing this separation anxiety training, yes, people do use daycare as a way of like, okay, well, at least if he's panicked, he's kind of panicked there and not at home. And initially he was fine, but it did become, I don't know if something happened at daycare, I don't know, but he was actually in the geriatric group, and he was like a 3-year-old dog. He was in the geriatric group because he wouldn't interact with anybody, and he would just panic while he was there too, even on meds. So it is really tricky. And for me, first time dog owner, I didn't know. And so I relied on daycare as a way to like bridge this gap between like, well, how do I work on separation anxiety and how do I not? And it can be really tricky. Unfortunately for my dog, it was, again, both, because I couldn't just leave him at home when I couldn't take him with me. It was a double thing. But so when I first did my research, the very first research or resource I used was Julie Naismith. She, from what I know about her, she does have a dog training kind of consult education. She went to like a 2-year program, I believe. She wrote a book called Be Right Back, and she has a very big group on Facebook. So that was like the first resource that I went to. I don't use Facebook much, but the Facebook groups are great. So I did like separation anxiety dog group. Her group is very active, and I think she's from the UK, if I remember correctly, but the group is definitely international. So I got on that group. You can buy the book on Amazon. So I got it, and she teaches you in the book step by step how to address separation anxiety. And then a lot of people use the Facebook group as like an adjunct. So they'll start the training, and then they'll get feedback from other users. And I think it's a really good resource, and it's also free and probably the cheapest way you can do it. And then I also worked with, I decided to hire a CSAT trainer, which are the certified separation anxiety trainers. I felt like, well, it's my first dollar, let's go all out. So I ended up doing my research on hiring that specific trainer. And that didn't come from my veterinary behaviorist. I mean, she had options for me, but this was something that I had already been in the works when I met with her. But those trainers are also kind of a very niche market, because there's not very many across the U.S. And I worked with, the organization I worked with was Melina DiMartini, and she's a certified dog behavioral consultant. She created her she created her website, and you can actually go on the website and hire a CSAT trainer. And for me, I did this, I believe it was 2021 is when I signed on, and it was like a 3-month wait list just to get a trainer. So they're in high demand because there's just not that many around. So I ended up doing kind of initially training on my own with using the Be Right Back book, using the Facebook group. And then I waited, I think it was 2 or 3 months for a CSAT trainer. And then I started with her, very expensive. I was literally paying, I believe, $800 a month.
Wow.
Just for a trainer. And again, it was like, I'm privileged to be able to do that. Looking back, I don't know if I would, but it was kind of like, do I go all out and hire a professional, or do you not? I did look at like some local trainers. There's one in Denver, one in Colorado, but same thing. It was about $600 a month and 2 or 3 month wait list. Because again, this was during the pandemic when a lot of people were addressing the issue. And in hindsight, I don't think I would use them again, but this is just because I had the firsthand experience. I mean, they were very helpful. The way the CSAT program works is they create a whole plan. So Monday through Friday kind of thing, or 5 days a week, you have a set plan of how you do these little training exercises with your dog to learn how to like leave your house. And then once a week, you have like a video Zoom call with your trainer, and then your trainer is the one analyzing the dog's behavior, giving you different training plans, giving you different techniques. And I hit or miss whether it was helpful for me. I think it was helpful, but by the end of like, they worked with her for maybe almost 3 months, and we were only up to maybe 30 minutes of being able to leave. And then we were at the transition point with our medication. The Clomicalm wasn't helping, and I ended up transitioning to a new veterinary office. So then we changed medication. So at that time, I kind of went rogue and did my own training and didn't use my trainer. But those are definitely two big resources that people can use. I think the free resources are almost better because you get a lot more quick access to other people in the community that are dealing with the same issues. But I think if you do have the time and resources, certified trainers can be good too.
Having multiple resources available, even if you're just starting with the free right before you jump into the paid, I think is good. And like you said, you were a first-time owner. You'd never dealt with this before. And that's the thing too, is that even if you're not a first-time owner, you might get a dog that has a first-time problem that you've never had with any of your other dogs. That's Fitz. He's my wild card. Like, I had no idea what I was getting into when I got Fitz because he had unknown, his mom's, unknown lineage. He was a rescue off the side of the road. We already knew, what his dad was, which was American Eskimo and Border Collie. But I had no idea that he was going to be so high energy and so, full of need for constant stimulation and activity and attention. And that was a really big adjustment. And I've had dogs since I was in my early 20s. And I've had multiple dogs, up to 3 at one time. So every dog, is different. And all of the things that you have to do to adjust for those behaviors are different. And, by the time this episode releases, I will be a couple of months into my certification program with Sailor Jerry, and I'm really excited about that. But training, I think, modalities, there's so many different ones, and there's so many different trainers. And I like that you didn't just stick to one thing. You went through the behaviorist. You went to 2 different ones that were on the internet. You used what came up as helpful from each of those resources, and then you continued to work on the situation yourself, adjusting to your own dog's needs. And that is the biggest message here, is that you adapted to your dog's needs based on your dog's personality and his responses to the training. And I think that that's where people get lost, because they get so focused on fixing the problem that they don't realize that adjusting the problem fixes is what's really the important part. Because you can have like this cookie cutter plan and they can tell you exactly step by step, this is how we're going to fix the problem. But what they don't tell you is that step 3 might only take you 2 weeks, but it might take 6 weeks for somebody else. And step 4 might take 5 days for you, but it took 3 months for somebody else. So we can't just have these like plans that are given out and not told, hey, this is all about modification. This is all about personalization. This is all about making this work for you. Time, energy, patience, commitment. These are all things that you need to have when you decide to adopt a dog, purchase a dog, whatever it is. And it sounds like you really dug into that, which is incredible because, not everybody does that. And then dogs get returned to shelters.
Oh, it's a huge thing. And I think I think that's where my initial whole encounter with how, like, what I knew stepping into this with a dog I've never had before, and what I know now is just I'm light years ahead of it. It's definitely, I definitely humanized his experiences and understood. I tried to empathize and put myself in his shoes, what I want to be, living with daily anxiety like that. No, I know some dog owners probably don't do that. I mean, you've seen stories like just leave the dog outside for 12 hours and the dog's fine and the dog's not fine, but they don't realize that. Or like you said, the dogs that are or left in crates that shouldn't be for too long, or come home and the home's terrorized. I mean, they may not, again, make that connection between your dog is really struggling. And I did. It's very traumatizing when you do watch your dog go through that panic attack on camera. I mean, I would be at work. Luckily, I'm so busy at work. I didn't have time to check sometimes. But when I would see him on camera just absolutely having a panic attack, it just melts your heart because you're like, I don't want my dog to panic. And then even having to like watch my dog panic to go into daycare, it's like I had to just, I had to totally throw everything I was doing out the window and just be a lot more aggressive with, especially the medications. And when you're working with these certified trainers, it is the hardest part, I think, is that maybe my CSAT trainer wasn't a good fit for us, but I had waited 3 months to her, so I didn't really have a choice. It was whoever's available is available. And that can be tricky too, because there's not a lot of them around, and then you may not be a good fit, and maybe it would have been different with a totally different trainer. It's hard to say. She definitely gave me the tools that I needed to use, but I was one of those people that, as much as I had time and patience to work with him, it was only probably 9 months after I got him, and then we were right back Monday through Friday in the clinic. So I didn't have a good year to train him just on the separation anxiety for work. I really had to go all in, and that's just very hard for dog owners to figure that out. And it does take a lot of trial and error with different techniques. In terms of his medication, it's still ongoing whether we found a good fit. It's difficult if your generalized kind of veterinarian doesn't want to work with you, because again, the cost of working with the behaviorist is a lot. I only worked with the veterinary behaviorist for probably 6 months. I just felt like I was spending a lot of money for them just to focus on aggression, which we weren't focused on. We would do a telehealth appointment. He might adjust his medication based on our conversation. And then I got a really generic discharge sheet that says how to help your aggressive dog. And I was like, what? So for me, it wasn't a good fit. I think they focused more on different type of dog behaviors. And for him and I, it was mainly just separation anxiety. And I had a whole different trainer that I used for reactivity issues. But medications, again, can take months to even see if they're going to work. We were on Clomicalm and clonidine for, I think, 3 months. And then we did a trial of just fluoxetine and Prozac. That didn't help. Right now, we're on trazodone, and that's the ticket for him. Trazodone, and again, you have to play around with the dose. But he doesn't panic. Is he super comfortable, knocked out asleep? No. But he at least can lay down on the sofa, and there's no panting and no drooling and no barking, and he's just much more relaxed. So trazodone has been the one thing that's worked the best for us. And now we're playing around with dosing it maybe twice a day. I did another trial of fluoxetine again this year, but it just doesn't work for us. So still a lot of trial and error, but once you do find that right fit, again, I just use mine on Monday through Friday on the days that he has to deal with me being on for work, and then on the weekends we don't have to use it. So, and it's also a good fit if your dog has horrible firework anxiety, because it works for that too. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, again, that's another area where trial and error, like you said, is really important. And you kind of have to be able to monitor the behavior. So again, the cameras really help here, I'm sure, in this situation. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that, every dog, again, like every person, is going to react differently to medication. If you give Fitz trazodone, it's like giving him speed. It makes him worse. He gets crazy. I have had problems with cutting his nails ever since he was a puppy. He just doesn't like it. He doesn't like the sound. He doesn't like the feel. You pull out the clippers, he's gone. End of story. So, of course, I talked to my vet. They're like, let's give him some trazodone. Let's knock him out a little bit. It'll be fine. No, it was not fine. It was insanity. He turned into the Tasmanian devil, which, I've seen a lot of dogs on trazodone before, and I've never seen one turn into a Tasmanian devil, but mine turns into a Tasmanian devil. So now we just, play a lot in the yard and hope that the sidewalk wears down the nails enough, because it's too stressful for him, and I don't want to make his life uncomfortable. And, some people are probably going to say, oh, you could fix that. I'm sure that we could, but we have other concerns that are more important than nail trims to work on right now. So we'll get there eventually, but we're definitely not using trazodone again. That was not a right fit for us, but I'm glad that it worked for you. While we're talking about medications, I want to ask you, how do you feel that your career as a nurse for people translates into your care for your dog medically?
There's definitely a perfect correlation, because again, I kind of treat dogs are kind of like, they say that they're the IQ of like a toddler, I don't know, young child. And in my family medicine job, of course, I'm diagnosing young kids with ADHD, neurodivergent, mental health disorders, and a lot of times the parents don't want to start medications, which I get. There's a lot of reservations with that. So sometimes the medications are the last resort for their children. And I think I see that a lot in the dog world too. Even on the Facebook group, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to use medications. I want to try this anxiety training for as long as possible before I try meds. A lot of people would be like, they would really help though, even with your training. And just like human mental health disorders, you do cognitive behavioral therapy, the therapy side of it with medications, and in research that shows better results if you're trying to address PTSD, depression, what have you. I think the same thing applies to dogs and to animals. So I still have the protocols in place for his separation anxiety. In the morning, I have a whole lot of routine. There's certain patterns that I do every day so he knows that I'm leading. But there's still the training piece involved with the medication that at least help his brain to actually process what's happening. Because the dog's not going to learn during anxiety. If the dog's still having active anxiety during your training, it's not going to work. So it's, for some dogs, that's quicker and easier to grasp than others. And I think that's important to understand that. So the reservations that people have with medications, they definitely have to kind of self-actualize and understand, like, why am I so reluctant to use them? And it could be also, other family members maybe, oh, why would you need meds for your dog? Or if your veterinary specialist is not, advocating for you to decrease some of that stigma around meds, and maybe as a dog owner, you don't realize that those are resources. And I think there's a lot of things in the environment you can definitely address. But if we're letting go of that whole piece of medications can help, then you're missing out on a very large portion of the medical care that your animal might need.
Exactly. I think that you're exactly right about that. And again, you really covered the full spectrum of everything here. You did the training, you did the medication, you saw the behaviorist, and like you said, you went definitely the more expensive route, and you have a career that allows you to do that, which is incredible, because unfortunately, there are not resources out there for everyone that they can afford. So we will share the information regarding the websites and the Facebook groups and everything that you used for those trainers, because I do think that, like you said, buying the book is cheaper than paying $800 a month. And that could at least start you off somewhere. And if you can't hire a vet behaviorist, you can still find another trainer that can help you with separation anxiety. You can still find another trainer that can help you with aggression. You can still help with basically any other topic, any and all topics. I mean, that's what dog trainers do, right? So you just have to find, again, what's right for you. And like you said, you might not necessarily have gone the expensive route again this time. But you also took steps to make sure that if this happens again in the future, that you do have the resources for it, because you got your CSTAT, correct?
No, you're just using, you just use them. But even if you go with the Melina DiMartini site, like, you can go on her site and it's like a $200 self course. So you can just take the self course and just do it yourself. But the Be Right Back book has like a little protocol in the back of like how you actually do the steps. So it's like a stepwise program. But I think the only reason I went the expensive route is because I wanted as much information as quickly as possible, and I wanted to consult with a specialist. But that's also because the first veterinary, his Philly veterinarian was kind of hands off with it. She didn't really want to talk about it much. She only recommended one med, and she was kind of done. His current veterinarian, she's really willing to try a lot of meds with me compared to having to go to a behaviorist. I also think it depends on who you're working with. And if your regular vet doesn't want to work with you on it, I feel like you should find probably a better veterinary option, but maybe not the veterinary behaviorist. Just like with me, I'm a primary care person. I'll prescribe you depression meds, and we'll trial and error 3 or 4 meds, but then I might say you need to see psychiatry. So the same concept for dogs, and I think it depends on who you're working with, and it just takes a lot of the trial and error part, and the patience with it is the most time consuming part of it, because you want that instant relief for your dog, and it's not going to happen, but you want that because you want to help them as fast as possible. But there are definitely plenty of free and very cheap options. I think those can work good initially, but you may have to reach out to some specialists, because if you hit that roadblock, it can be very challenging to navigate that by yourself, especially if you invest in medications and find different fits.
Well, and again, like I said, we are going to have a vet behaviorist come on hopefully sometime later this year. I've been talking to a couple of them who have agreed, so we're going to take steps to definitely get them on here, because it is a really good opportunity to just ask some questions I think that the community will have. And maybe, if you're listening to this episode and you have questions about vet behaviorists, please email them to the show. Please email them to me. You can go to the website and email us at straightupdogtalk.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram or TikTok with those questions, because I really would like to compile an accurate list for people. But again, Kendra is providing us with some really great resources to get everybody started as far as that goes. And I can also say that as a vet tech, we appreciate working with people who are in the human medical space, because you know how to ask the right questions when it comes to medication, because you're already thinking about, I'm in this headspace, I work with children, I work with adults, I work with, whatever, and I use these medications to help people all day. So how can I better use these tools to help with my dog? So remember that training is a resource, medication is a resource, the vet behaviorist is a resource, a trainer is a resource. Using multiple things is not wrong. Using multiple things is often the right way to go, because it gives you a better platform. You mentioned the instant gratification and, trying to get to that end goal. That's another thing, that we kind of have this problem with social media, is that people don't show this side of the animals. They don't show the separation anxiety. They don't show the nervous behavior. They don't show the aggression, because they're embarrassed about it. But constantly showing the internet these candy-coated, picturesque, perfect versions of our dogs without explaining, it took me 2 years to train him how to do this trick, and I cried 15 times, and I am so stressed out that I can't even be proud that he can do this trick, is something that we don't talk about enough. And so I really, really appreciate the fact that you were willing to come on here today and talk about all of these things, because this really is an important conversation that we need to be having in this community.
No, I agree. And there was one, and right after I got Luca, I was delved into a lot of the Instagram, social media dog accounts, and I did find, a pit bull account, and her dog had the same thing as me, reactivity plus separation anxiety. And without seeing what she posted, again, I was kind of clueless initially. I mean, luckily my veterinary specialist, again, was very no, this is a true panic disorder, we got to address it. But I think without seeing that side on social media, you kind of blow it off, or you don't. You think it's just kind of this is normal dog behavior. And it's just good to finally have that acknowledgement that, no, this is a medical condition, we need to treat it and take it seriously. And it is hard. And even the reactivity journey can take years. And now that he's 2 years down the road, I mean, could I leave him for an hour without medication by himself at home? Sure. Would I leave him for 8 hours without medication? No. But I think it does take a very long time to get to that space. And without what I found on social media, without the groups and support groups, it can be very challenging to go it alone. And I think it is hard, because again, you'll see people that I've even seen people on social media talk about how their partners are not even supportive of it. Well, just leave the dog and they'll be fine. And it's hard, because you do kind of go that battle alone. If you're an empathetic dog owner, you're not going to want to see your animal suffer. And some people just don't have that connection, and whatever human trait that is, maybe they just don't have it. So And even, like I said, the program that I use, I mean, they could have left Luca in the crate just to panic at the cell dog program. It's possible. And so, their definition of crate training maybe wasn't exactly the setup that it should have been. So they made it seem like, oh, he's super comfortable in the crate, when in reality, he definitely wasn't. But, somebody else would have just went with that and said, oh, he's fine in the crate, keep it going. Whereas I immediately saw, no, that's an issue. So the social media aspect has definitely been a huge plus, because you can now see it more. And like we mentioned offline, the whole concept of now when I see a video, I immediately know it's separation anxiety. Whatever the video is, that dog has separation anxiety. And sometimes I'll comment on it and people will agree. And everyone's like, oh, no, you're just humanizing the dog. It's like, no, I can see the dog panicking. So now when I see cute videos, I can't even enjoy it, because I see the dog panic and I see their anxiety. So it almost makes it more of a challenge when you're navigating social media.
Absolutely. It really truly does. And it's so funny because as the podcaster, I find myself reaching out to those accounts and saying, hey, do you want to talk about this? Hey, do you need help with this? What can we do to make this situation better? So hopefully, we'll have some people listen to this episode and they will reach out to you, reach out to me, and we can continue to help in this area. So I think that we're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for being here. You really provided us with a really specific amount of information on a topic that is so heavy in this community. And I just truly appreciate you being open and sharing your story with us. And we're definitely going to have you come back, because we have other things that we want to talk about with you, like how to properly integrate a dog with separation anxiety into a household with cats, because you did do that as well. So we will definitely be having you come back. And again, thank you so much for being here.
It was great to be here. And any questions, shoot them my way. I don't post a lot of the intricate detailed stuff on my social media, but you could always reach out. And of course, I'm navigating the reactivity piece too, so I can definitely relate to people's challenges.
Absolutely. And we will provide your social media content, accounts, and all that kind of stuff in the episode details on Instagram, TikTok, and the episode details here on the podcast. So we're going to wrap up another episode of Straight Up Dog Talk. Thank you so much for being here, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Straight Up Dog Talk was created by Emily Breslin. It is edited, produced, and co-hosted by Josh Wasta under the supervision of Straight Up Dog Talk, LLC, and Emily Breslin. If you're enjoying this podcast, follow or subscribe to be sure you don't miss an episode, and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Looking for more honest and relatable dog content? Check out our sister show, Unpacked, with Jerry Sheriff and Madison Simpson. Thanks for listening to Straight Up Dog Talk. See you next week.